so lonely. If you're leaving, baby, let me down slowly. Let me down.
People who were at celebrative events during 9/11s, for example weddings or birthdays, what was the impact of 9/11s on the course of the event? The day of was not the celebration, but the day after. On the 11th, my mom was pregnant with my youngest brother, and her brother, my uncle, was supposed to be in the tower for a meeting. All the phone lines were down and we could not find out where he was. Understandably worried, my mother ends up going into labor. On the 12th, we find out that my uncle was late to work, very out of character, and was safe. It turns out he had to stay home for a plumber, and when he tried to get to work, he couldn't get on the subway or find a taxi. Very focused, he just started walking towards the towers, frustrated that he was late. Someone actually stopped him on the street to tell him, "You can't go that way," and explain what happened. His outlook on that day quickly changed. Later on the 12th, my baby brother was born, and it was my grandmother's 60th birthday as well. My grandmother would say that between finding her son was safe and her grandson being born, it was the best birthday ever. Not me, but my friend and her family were on vacation in Disney World. They were minding their own business, having a great day, until all of a sudden everyone was exiting the park in a rush. They asked a cast member what was happening, and he told them the news. Since no one knew the scope of what was happening, the parks were being evacuated in case they were the next target. We live pretty close to New York, so they spent the rest of the day panicked calling everyone they've ever known in their hotel room to make sure everyone was okay. Not a celebration, but I was giving a tour of my university to potential students and their parents. We just gotten underway shortly before. So by this point I have them partway across campus, and this is our science building. It's nice we have trees and other natural things here in the courtyard, and why are there all those TVs, and what are those people watching? Then when we walked up to one and saw the second plane hit, that was the end of whatever tour I was giving. It wasn't even conscious, I just didn't talk to any of them anymore, thinking just about what I was looking at, and then I wandered away to go home forgetting they were there.
I think all college campuses looked the same that day. I taught a morning and afternoon class, and the morning class started at 8 a.m. Central Time. I was in the middle of teaching, and this was obviously before people had access to news at the tip of their fingers, so I was unaware of what happened until I started waking around campus and saw people gathered around small TVs in tears. I cancelled my afternoon class, and most people, students and professors, just hung around campus in shock of what occurred. I was talking to my teens about it, and they mentioned how if that happened now, a few kids would have announced it after seeing something about it on Twitter, and how everyone would have been watching what happened unfold on their individual phones and laptops, rather than being crammed together in front of a small TV screen to get as much information as they could.
Rather than being crammed together in front of a small TV screen to get as much information as they could. Yes, I was working in the IT department of my university, and one of our techs wheeled in a TV so we could all gather around. Many of the news sites were down anyway, due to so much internet traffic.
I was prepping for a high school cross-country event in Missouri. I was very focused on the event, and we had heard something happened in New York, but we kinda blew it off, like it wasn't that big of a deal. Our parents started showing up for the morning races, and runners were leaving, and the coaches kept delaying the start of the races. There was a lot of talk amongst the runners and coaches, but us kids kept minimizing what was going on. There weren't any TVs at the course, and this was before kids had phones, so we really didn't know. Finally, my mom showed up and ran up to the coach, clearly very upset. She was scared and I had no idea why. I was whisked away from the meet, and in the car my mom told me what was happening and cursing the coaches for not sending us home. I was pissed. I had trained for this meet and was trying to break my personal best so I could be varsity. When I finally saw what was happening on TV, I finally understood and accepted how big of a deal this was. It was a Tuesday morning in the US. I'm guessing not too many parties were going on. I was at work. It was loud and I was trying to hear the radio, but the boss told us to keep working. I thought it was an accident until the second one hit. I was thinking it was a small plane. It wasn't until lunch, when people were talking about it and trying to watch a shitty TV from an antenna, that I actually understood what happened. We were told to just keep working since there was nothing we could do. One guy kept saying there was going to be a nuclear war over this. We had an informal basketball game set for every Tuesday night. I called a friend I would pick up and asked if we should go, and he said, "What else are we going to do?" So we went. It was a short game, but most people showed up.
Yeah, my dad woke me up for school and just casually said, "A plane hit the World Trade Center," as if it were a freak accident. Also, I lived in a small town and had never seen skyscrapers in real life, so when I heard a plane hit the World Trade Center, I pictured a plane crashing into a big shopping mall.
Were schools cancelled? Did you go? I can't remember if that happened for public schools. I know a lot of things in the afternoon were. The colleges in the area cancelled all-night classes. Traffic was really light. My dad called and said to go fill up with gas. But a bunch of places near me were gouging and I wasn't going to pay $5 or more per gallon.
So I was in grade 11 at the time, and every morning my teacher would put on CNN while everyone worked. He was an old school teacher who really didn't give a beep what we did as long as we weren't bugging him. I remember the breaking news popping up when they said a plane hit the tower, and everyone honestly thought it was just a little plane like a Cessna or something. It was very much like, "Oh, just an accident, everyone stay calm," but then on live TV we watched the second plane hit and oh my beeping god, the room went silent, and I clearly remember saying, "What the beep, man?" because the newscasters were clearly getting upset, and my teacher got up from his desk to look. The sense of dread was unbelievable. I had a brother in New York at the time going to university, so I asked my teacher if I could go home to call him, and he said no problem. I ran beeping home. And I mean I ran. So many thoughts rushing through my head like, is my brother dead? Are we at war? Are we going to war? Is anywhere else gonna get hit? My brother was okay, but he knew some people at his school that had family working at the Twin Towers. No one should ever have to experience something like that ever again. It still feels like yesterday.
Glad he was okay. I felt so far removed from it. I was in the Midwest and didn't know anybody from NY. Everything seemed so normal for me. I worked a full day, went out that night, went to work the next day. It was hard to grasp what happened or really remember the events. I would probably be more understanding today, but at the time I saw what I thought was a lot of selfishness. It just got to the point where people had to make it personal to identify, and that bugged me. Like my cousin's ex-wife's parents live in Utica, I should see if they are okay type thing. A few called in sick because they were so upset about the attack. The people who just watched the news and did nothing else for weeks really bugged me. Like the South Park episode. But I was coming out of a dark period of my life and things were starting to go good, so it was probably me that was being selfish. I did go to the memorial and museum a few years ago and it was really sobering to see it in real life. Seemed more real, but also really good to see the city thriving.
I worked at a theater as a house manager on that day. The theatre catered to the retired set. It was my job that everyone had a nice experience. I would talk to the folks on the buses before they came in, mingle with them before the show and at intermission and so on. They would come in on bus tours. This particular show celebrated the UI era, so there was a mix of patriotic music, big band, that kind of thing. This was their era. I had always joked that someday I would be on a bus seeing a musical review about Nirvana and complaining about how loud it is. We had a 3 o'clock and a 7:30 show. This is East Coast USA time, so I was there in the hours after, not in the midst of it. In theatre, the show must go on right. I have several memories from that experience. 1. The folks who were coming to see the shows were the folks who fought to be I talked to as many of them as I could. They were devastated. They thought they fought the war that would ultimately keep us safe. This was Pearl Harbor all over again. 2. We did the 3 p.m. show. The performers couldn't get through the patriotic songs. It was too emotional. One woman in particular broke down on stage. They did the best they could. On the spot, they sang God Bless America in unison. It was a beautiful moment. Everyone stood and cried. 3. The performers walked out before the 7:30 show. Understandably, they just couldn't do it. It fell onto me to tell people arriving that it was cancelled. Most understood, some people were beeping beeps about it.
We had a choir concert scheduled right after the Sandy Hook shooting, a couple of towns away. We had a discussion over whether it would be appropriate to have the performance, and decided to go on based on this Leonard Bernstein quote, "This will be our reply to violence. To make music more intensely, more beautifully, more devotedly than ever before."
I'm on the West Coast, and I got to sleep in that morning, so the whole thing had been over for a couple hours by the time I woke up. I wake up, walk into the living room, my roommate has the TV on. He turns to me and says, "Jude, you got to sit down." He then says they're both gone, both towers. I was like, what? He just says, "They're gone, Jude, terrorists flew planes into them." But the TV was airing footage of the smoking towers still standing, and I pointed that out to him. He said, "They're just showing footage from earlier. They have both since collapsed. They're gone." I still couldn't believe it until I finally sat down and tuned in. I can't describe the sensation I felt in my chest when the reality of the situation dawned on me. Then I called friends and family. I had a noon class, so I called my university. Surprisingly, a real human answered and told me all classes were cancelled. I wanted to get a bite before work. My friend picked me up to go eat because he was in shock and wanted out of his pad. We drove around for a while looking for a restaurant that stayed open before we found a sushi bar. It was packed since no one else stayed open, and everyone was just watching the TV in the corner. People were making comments about revenge. I can tell they were all in as much shock as me. I worked as a projectionist at an IMAX theater in a museum. My shift started at 2 p.m. My boss told me to not screen any of the movies and just pipe CNN through the digital projector and leave the doors to the theater open. School groups and tourists were just sitting there watching replays of the towers falling on a 70-foot screen in surround sound. Finally, after an hour or so, I was told to just shut down and go home. The rest of the day I just watched footage, like most of America. I remember going to bed feeling very, very scared, a fear I had never felt before.
Yep. Yeah, old top floor. God! Oh my God, look at that explosion!
As I stand on the hang bridge, which is closed to use, open to pedestrian traffic. Some people don't want to get